teachers in fact supported the Bush Credit extension, and that tax credit extension was worth more than all the state budget deficits combined. Like, where is the money? The big oil companies found them in the $1 trillion in profit since 9/11, and they're still getting subsidy. Where is the money? So now we're paying the terrible price, and now they're using as a pretense we don't have the money, or there may be fraud. Fraud is illegal, and so if it's fraud to enforce the law, there's no evidence of fraud. There's more evidence of Section 5 violations than there is of impersonations, for example. We must now create a new consciousness at every level of media and political order, multiracial, those who benefit from our democracy, who celebrated Mandela's release from prison for democracy, who fight wars in Iraq for democracy, try democracy at home. And all of us participating is really what democracy looks like.
Yes.
Hi, Gloria Montano Green with the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials. There are about 6,000 Latino elected officials from various levels of government, local, school boards, federal, etc. I think one of the important things is to think about local elected officials are responsible for funding and overseeing who's going to be the election administrator. So they have a lot of concerns because locally your election administrator is the one that understands the problems of poll training, the access to funding, the funding dilemmas, and the true problems of voter engagement, which is that we are not doing the proactive stuff locally. So I think when you're talking about the voice and the role, the local elected officials are having to have the burden of implementing some of these state items, and they understand and they want and desire to have elections open for all.
I guess I would only add one other thing in response to your question, which I thought was a terrific one. There are already many coalitions in place, some reflected by our friends at the LAO, others with the National Coalition of Black State Legislators, and collective efforts that have been put together by civil and human rights, labor groups, religious organizations, students, persons with disabilities. I could go on. One of those, of course, is the Leadership Conference, which is a coalition of over 200 groups. But you also had progressive convenings of groups from the One Nation convening on October 2nd that brought a huge march to Washington, to efforts that Barbara Arnwine has undertaken with legal organizations that are litigating in this area, as reflected in part by today's press conference, and also a collaborative known as We Are One, which is a collaboration of state activists, elected officials, and national leaders to coordinate many of the activities that you are seeing. The press conference today, spearheaded by Reverend Jackson and Rainbow Bush and the Lawyers Committee, is specifically focused on trying to bring both public awareness to a greater audience, much in need, but also to convince the Department of Justice that it has a responsibility to examine these issues and to connect the dots. Certainly there are responsibilities that are derived from the Voting Rights Act of 1969. There are other responsibilities which are derived from the very Constitution itself, to have the Department of Justice make certain that the rationale for adopting provisions like voter ID, which have no empirical basis, no factual basis to justify their initiation, are then exposed for what they are, really crude tools to disenfranchise voters who could make a difference in the upcoming election cycle. And I think when you keep your eye focused on the fact that this is a subtle, beneath the radar screen effort to coordinate what may well be the most aggressive, comprehensive assault on those elements that help to make up the American dream, I think the American people will become alarmed, and I think they will rise up, as we have seen in state after state, whether it's Wisconsin, whether it's Florida, whether it's Indiana, we could go on. And I think that map of shame both identifies those states that are likely to be the next priorities on the list of trying to block these initiatives, as well as efforts that have to be redoubled to make sure that the upcoming election days are handled well. So thank you.
Well, I know Bob has to go to a board meeting now, but let me say to you as we prepare to close this section, that there's a context of the entire civil rights gains infrastructures under attack. The struggle in Montgomery, Alabama, with Rosa Parks was challenging states' rights. She didn't just sit down idle as some woman, as the myth goes, with bare feet and tired and didn't want to walk. She and Attorney Fred Gray had been meeting to test the 54 Supreme Court decision challenging states' rights. And when we won the boycott, which was a victory, the bigger victory was we won the lawsuit in 56 against states' rights. The battle for public accommodation was against states' rights. The battle for the right to vote was a battle against states' rights being used. The battle for open housing was about states' rights. And so right now, not only is the right to vote on attack, but EEOC, Employment Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, on the attack. Contract compliance on the attack. Affirmative action on the attack. All of the infrastructure built since 65 is on the attack, either by not being enforced or not by being funded. And therefore, we stand to lose 50 years of work by a solid ideological base of states' rights. They're trying to take the Supreme Court back. The states' rights Supreme Court deal gave the election away in 2000. That was a states' rights move by the Supreme Court. They said, but it happened, but it's not a precedent. Now they want to make the states' rights Supreme Court an official. That smells like 1896. We're on the dangerous edge of a states' rights takeover 150 years later. The New York Times article that closed last week gave Department of Justice hiring new lawyers, civil rights lawyers is a good thing. At the end it said that there's been a laxity on enforcing employment discrimination and gender and race on the one case filed on voter rights violation. That's why we put the burden upon this Department of Justice, in fact, to act aggressive, to convene the appropriate people. I'm a Republican and Democrat. If Republicans believe in democracy enough to fight a war in Iraq, they should be part of this coalition. Whoever believes in democracy, equal opportunity, equal access, equal protection under the law, who think democracy is worth fighting and dying for in Afghanistan and Iraq, try democracy at home. Thank you so much.